The wedding dress felt like a shroud. Elara Whitmore stood before the mirror in her father's ruined estate, watching her maid lace her into white silk that cost more than 3 months of their remaining staff's wages. Outside, the carriage waited. Black lacquer, no family crest, pulled by horses the color of smoke. It would take her to Thorncliffe Manor, to Duke Alistair Vane, to the man London called the Beast. Her hands shook. They say he doesn't let anyone see his face. Her younger sister had whispered the night before, eyes wide with awful fascination. They say the last woman who tried to leave his estate was found wandering the moors, unable to speak. Elara hadn't corrected her. What was the point? Truth or fiction, she was going anyway, because her father had gambled away everything, because her mother's medicine cost more each month, because the Vane family had made an offer that was really a command, your daughter's hand or your family's complete destruction. So here she was, 23 years old, sold like livestock to a monster. But here's what London society didn't know yet. What even Elara couldn't know as she stepped into that black carriage. The Beast wasn't the one she should fear. And the real monsters? They were already sharpening their knives. If you want to see how far this story reaches, drop a comment with your city below. Hit that like button. And settle in, because this is going to be one hell of a ride. The carriage jolted over uneven cobblestones, and Elara gripped the velvet seat to steady herself. Through the small window, London blurred past. Gray buildings, grayer sky, faces that turned to stare as the unmarked carriage passed. They knew. Somehow, they always knew. The Vane carriage. Taking another bride to the Beast. Elara forced herself to breathe evenly, the way her mother had taught her during the years of illness. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Don't let them see you panic. But her mother wasn't here now. No one was. Just Elara and the driver whose face she hadn't seen, and the steady clip of hooves taking her further from everything she'd ever known. The marriage had been arranged in her father's study 3 weeks ago. She'd stood outside the door, listening to voices she wasn't supposed to hear. "The Duke has made his terms clear," a cold voice had said. Lord Pemberton, her father's creditor, the man who held the papers that could ruin them. Miss Whitmore's hand in marriage. In exchange, all debts forgiven. The family estate remains yours. Your wife continues to receive the medical care she requires. A long silence. Then her father's voice, barely recognizable. "And if I refuse? Then I call in every loan by month's end. You'll lose the house, the land, everything. Your wife will die in a charity ward. Your daughters will be fortunate to find work as governesses, if anyone will have them after the scandal." Another silence, heavier than the first. May I at least meet the Duke? Speak with him about his intentions toward my daughter?" Pemberton had laughed. Actually laughed. "The Duke doesn't grant audiences, Whitmore. He doesn't attend society functions. He doesn't explain himself to anyone. You'll be lucky if he attends his own wedding." "Empathy, manage to make one." A pause. "He wants a wife. You need money. It's a simple transaction." Transaction. Elara had pressed her hand to the wall to keep from falling. That night, her father had called her into the study. He couldn't meet her eyes as he explained, couldn't look at her as he laid out the terms of her future. When he finally broke down, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, Elara had been the one to comfort him. "It's all right, Papa," she'd heard herself say. "I'll do it." Because what choice did she have? Let her mother die? Watch her younger sisters starve? For the sin of being born female in a world that treated women like currency? So she'd done what daughters had done for centuries. She'd said yes to the cage. The carriage turned sharply, leaving the main road. Elara caught glimpses of iron gates, overgrown hedges, trees that hadn't been trimmed in years. Thorncliffe Manor. She'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. The Duke who never left his estate, who conducted all business through intermediaries, who'd been engaged twice before. Both times the engagement had been broken, both women fleeing before the wedding could take place. No one knew what they'd seen, but everyone had theories. He's disfigured from a childhood fire. He's covered in scars from a war wound. He's mad, locked away for everyone's safety. He's cursed by a spurned lover. He's not even human anymore. The stories varied, but they all ended the same way, with a warning: don't marry the Beast. Elara had married him anyway. Or rather, she would in approximately 4 hours, according to the special license Pemberton had secured. A private ceremony. No guests, no celebration. Just a priest, 2 witnesses, and a bride who'd never even seen her groom's face. The carriage slowed, then stopped. Elara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The door opened. An elderly man in impeccable butler's livery stood there, his face weathered but kind. Miss Whitmore, welcome to Thorncliffe Manor. I am Graves, the head of household. If you'll allow me to help you down? His voice was gentle. His hand, when she took it, was steady and warm. Elara stepped out onto gravel and looked up. Thorncliffe Manor wasn't the Gothic nightmare she'd imagined. It was beautiful. A sprawling estate of gray stone and tall windows, ivy climbing the eastern wall, gardens that had once been magnificent and could be again. It looked lonely, like a house waiting for someone to care about it again. This way, please, Graves said. The Duke has arranged rooms for you to prepare. The ceremony will take place in the estate chapel at 4 o'clock. Will I meet him before then? Graves' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Sympathy, maybe. The Duke prefers to observe tradition. He will see you at the altar, Miss Whitmore. Observe tradition. What a pretty way to say he can't even face me before he owns me. But Elara just nodded and followed Graves into the house. Inside was dimmer than outside, heavy curtains drawn across most windows. But what she could see took her breath away. Soaring ceilings, a grand staircase with carved banisters, portraits of stern-faced Vanes watching from the walls. Wealth, history, power, all of it shrouded in dust and shadows. Mrs. Hewitt will attend to you, Graves said, nodding to a woman in a housekeeper's dress who appeared from a side hallway. If you need anything at all, please ask. The Duke wishes you to be comfortable. The Duke wishes, not His Grace would like or your future husband hopes, just that cold third-person distance. Mrs. Hewitt was warmer than Graves, a round woman with rosy cheeks and eyes that actually smiled when she looked at Elara. Come along, dear. Let's get you settled. You must be exhausted from the journey. It was only an hour from London, but Elara didn't correct her. The room they'd prepared was in the east wing, Mrs. Hewitt explained as they climbed the stairs. Large windows, morning light, a view of the gardens. His Grace thought you'd prefer it, the housekeeper said, more cheerful than the west wing. Has the Duke had many guests? Elara asked carefully. Mrs. Hewitt's smile faltered. Not in many years, miss. Not since... She stopped herself. Well, you're very welcome here. We all are quite glad you've come. The room was indeed beautiful. A 4-poster bed with cream-colored linens, a writing desk by the window, fresh flowers on the dresser. Someone had put effort into making this welcoming. I'll send a maid to help you dress, Mrs. Hewitt said, and I'll have tea brought up. You have a few hours yet. When she left, Elara sank onto the edge of the bed and let herself shake. 3 hours until she married a stranger, a man who wouldn't even let her see him before the ceremony, a man the entire city feared. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds. The gardens were overgrown but still showed their bones, hedges that had once been shaped, paths that wound between flower beds now choked with weeds. At the far edge, she could see what looked like a greenhouse, glass panels catching the weak afternoon sun. Someone had loved this place once. Someone had cared enough to build all this beauty. What had happened to make it die? A knock at the door. A young maid entered, carrying Elara's wedding dress in her arms like it was made of glass. Miss Whitmore? I'm Annie. I'm to help you prepare. Annie was barely 16, all nervous energy and obvious curiosity. As she helped Elara out of her traveling clothes and into the wedding dress, she chattered about the house, the staff, the weather. Anything, Elara realized, except the Duke. Have you worked here long? Elara asked as Annie fastened the tiny buttons up her back. 3 years, miss, since I was 13. And have you seen the Duke often? Annie's hand stilled. I've never seen him, miss. None of the staff have, except Graves and Mrs. Hewitt, and they don't speak of it. Never? He keeps to the west wing. We leave his meals outside the door, Clean when he's away from his rooms. Everything's done, so we never... She trailed off, then resumed buttoning with fumbling fingers. I'm sorry, miss. I shouldn't frighten you. I'm sure he's perfectly kind. Mrs. Hewitt says he's always been good to the staff. Fair wages, good conditions. He's not cruel. Just invisible. Just a ghost in his own house. When Annie finished, Elara stood before the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress was exquisite, far finer than anything her family could have afforded even before the debts. Silk and lace and tiny pearls sewn into the bodice. She looked like a bride from a fairy tale, the kind that gets locked in a tower. You look beautiful, miss, Annie whispered. Truly. Elara touched the lace at her throat. Thank you, Annie. Another knock. Graves stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. It's time, Miss Whitmore. Her legs felt like water, but she walked. Down the hallway, down the grand staircase, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Finally, a small door. Graves opened it to reveal a chapel. It was smaller than she'd expected. Old stone, narrow windows with stained glass. Wooden pews that could seat perhaps 50 people. Empty, all of them, except for two figures in the front row. A thin man in priest's robes and a woman Elara didn't recognize, presumably the second witness. And at the altar, with his back to her, a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that made him look like a shadow given form. He didn't turn as she entered. Elara's breath caught. This was it. This was the moment she'd walk down an aisle to marry a stranger. The moment her life as Elara Whitmore ended and her life as... what? The beast's bride? The Duchess of Vane? A prisoner? Her feet moved anyway. One step. Another. The chapel was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat, the rustle of silk, the faint scuff of her shoes on stone. She reached the altar. The man still didn't turn. The priest cleared his throat. Shall we begin? A pause that felt like an eternity. Then, a voice from the man in black. Yes. Deep, rough around the edges, like he didn't use it often, but not monstrous, not inhuman, just a man's voice. The ceremony began. Elara stood there, staring at the back of her groom's head, dark hair, slightly too long, touching his collar, as the priest droned through words she barely heard. Do you take this woman? Do you take this man? For richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Her voice, when she said, I do, sounded like it belonged to someone else. His came out steady. I do. The ring, Your Grace. For the first time, the Duke moved. He turned, not fully, not enough for her to see his face, just enough to reach for her hand. His fingers closed around hers. Elara's breath stopped. His hand was warm, large, calloused at the fingertips like he worked with them. He slid a ring onto her finger, gold, simple, no stones, and his thumb brushed against her skin for just a second before he released her and turned away again. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the priest said. Your Grace, you may... That will be all, the Duke said, cutting him off. Graves, see that our witnesses are compensated for their time. He walked away, just turned and walked out of the chapel without another word, leaving Elara standing at the altar in her wedding dress, staring after him. The priest looked embarrassed. The female witness looked scandalized. Graves just looked tired. Mrs. Hewitt will show you to your rooms, Your Grace, he said quietly, and it took Elara a moment to realize he was talking to her. Your Grace, she was a duchess now. She'd just become one of the most powerful women in England, and her husband wouldn't even look at her face. Elara followed Mrs. Hewitt back through the corridors in a daze. The housekeeper kept up a stream of cheerful chatter about dinner, about the household schedule, about which rooms Elara was free to use. But Elara barely heard it. She was married. She was married to a man she'd never seen. She was trapped here. This will be your suite, Your Grace, Mrs. Hewitt said, opening a door. Connected to His Grace's chambers, but with your own private rooms. He wanted you to have your own space, said you weren't to be disturbed unless you wished it. The suite was beautiful. Sitting room, bedroom, dressing room, even a small bathroom with an actual porcelain tub. Windows overlooking the gardens, books on the shelves, a writing desk stocked with paper and ink, a cage, but a gilded one. Dinner will be at 8, Mrs. Hewitt said. Though His Grace takes his meals in his study, so you'll dine alone, I'm afraid. But I'll make sure cook prepares something nice for your first evening. First evening. As if there would be hundreds more, thousands, the rest of her life stretched out in this beautiful prison. Mrs. Hewitt, Elara said quietly, why did he marry me? The housekeeper's smile faded. That's not my place to say, Your Grace. But you know. A long pause, then, I know he's lonely. I know this house has been dying by inches for 10 years, and I know, she hesitated, I know he's a good man who's been hurt very badly. That's all I can tell you. She left before Elara could ask anything else. Alone, Elara sank into a chair by the window and watched the sun set over the gardens. Her wedding day. She'd imagined it as a girl, like all girls did. A handsome husband who looked at her like she was the only person in the world. Dancing, laughter, love. Instead, she'd gotten a ghost and a golden cage. She touched the ring on her finger. Simple, almost plain. But it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Had he chosen it himself? Or had some servant done it? Did he even care? A soft knock. Annie entered with a dinner tray, eyes wide. Your Grace! Oh, I'm sorry, I should have asked. It's fine, Annie. Elara's voice came out more tired than she meant. You can call me by my name when we're alone. The girl looked scandalized. Oh, I couldn't, Please. Elara surprised herself with how much she meant it. Everyone here calls me Your Grace, or Madam, or Duchess. I'd like to hear my own name sometimes. Annie bit her lip, then nodded. All right, Elara. It helped, just a little. Elara picked at the dinner, roasted chicken, vegetables, fresh bread, all delicious, but she could barely taste it. Annie hovered, clearly bursting with questions, but too polite to ask. Finally, Elara asked for her. What do you know about the Duke, Annie? The truth, not the stories. The maid glanced at the door like she expected someone to burst through. I don't know much, she said in a hushed voice. Just what Mrs. Hewitt has let slip over the years. He wasn't always like this. 10 years ago he was. Normal. Went to London, attended society events, had friends. He was going to get married. Elara sat up straighter. What happened? The engagement ended, badly from what I understand. After that he came back here and never left. Started hiding, stopped seeing people. Annie twisted her apron in her hands. Mrs. Hewitt says he wasn't always the beast. Something made him that way. Something. Or someone. After Annie left, Elara tried to read, but the words swam on the page. Tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't quiet. Finally, around midnight, she gave up and wrapped a shawl around her shoulders to explore. The house was different at night. Shadows pooled in corners. Floorboards creaked. But it wasn't frightening exactly. Just waiting. Like the whole place was holding its breath. She found the library by accident. A door left slightly ajar, light spilling out. Inside, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, comfortable chairs, a fire burning low in the hearth. And the smell. Leather and paper. And wood smoke. Heaven. Elara stepped inside, drawn like a moth to flame. She'd always loved books. Had spent half her childhood in her father's library before he'd been forced to sell most of his collection to pay debts. These books looked well-loved. Cracked spines, dog-eared pages. Someone read these regularly. She pulled one down at random, Paradise Lost, notes in the margins in a cramped, angular hand. The Duke's handwriting? You shouldn't be here. Elara spun around, the book tumbling from her hands. A figure stood in the doorway. Tall, dressed in dark clothing, face completely hidden in shadow. The Duke. Her husband. I'm sorry, Elara said, hating how her voice shook. I couldn't sleep. I didn't mean to intrude. This is your house now. His voice was that same rough rumble from the chapel. You can go where you like. Then why shouldn't I be here? A pause. I meant, I come here at night. I didn't expect to see anyone. He hadn't expected to see his own wife in his own house, because he'd assumed she'd stay locked in her pretty rooms like a good little duchess. Something hot and defiant flared in Elara's chest. Should I leave? Another pause, longer this time. No. He moved further into the room, but stayed in the shadows where she couldn't see him clearly, just a silhouette. He picked up the book she'd dropped and set it back on the shelf with careful hands. "You like Milton?" he asked. The question surprised her. "I've never read him. He's better than his reputation suggests. If you can get past the theology." He pulled another book down. "Try this instead. If you're having trouble sleeping." He held it out. Elara had to step closer to take it. For a moment, they were less than an arm's length apart. She could see his hand more clearly now in the firelight. Long fingers, a thin scar across the knuckles. She could smell him, soap and leather and something else. Not unpleasant, not monstrous, just human. She took the book. Wuthering Heights. "Thank you." He stepped back immediately, putting distance between them. "The library is yours whenever you want it. I'll use it at different hours. You don't have to do that. It's easier." He moved toward the door. "Good night, Your Grace." "Elara," she said before she could stop herself. "My name is Elara." He froze in the doorway, didn't turn around. "I know." Then he was gone, and she was alone again. Elara looked down at the book in her hands, at the margin notes in that same cramped handwriting. He'd given her one of his favorites, something he'd read enough times to annotate. He'd spoken to her. Actually spoken, not just formal ceremony words. And he'd called her Your Grace, but he'd paused when she told him her name. Like maybe he'd wanted to say it. It wasn't much, but it was something. Elara carried the book back to her room and climbed into bed. This time, when she opened it and started reading, the words didn't swim. They anchored her. Someone else's story, someone else's doomed love affair on the moors. She fell asleep with the book on her chest and dreamed of shadows that spoke in rough, gentle voices. The next morning, Elara woke to rain against the windows and Annie bringing breakfast. "His Grace asked me to give you this," the maid said, handing over a folded note. Elara's heart kicked up as she opened it. "The greenhouse is unlocked if you'd like to see it. The head gardener is Thompson. Tell him I sent you, that was all. No signature." But the handwriting matched the margin notes in the books. "Annie, what's the greenhouse like?" The maid's face lit up. "Oh, it's beautiful. Or it was. I haven't seen inside in years. His Grace keeps it locked usually. Spends time there himself sometimes, but no one else is allowed." "Why?" "I don't know, but if he's giving you permission," Annie grinned, "you should definitely go." The rain had stopped by mid-morning. Elara borrowed a cloak and boots and made her way through the gardens to the greenhouse at the far edge of the property. It was larger than she'd thought. Glass panels, iron frame, clearly built with care and expense. Through the foggy glass, she could see green, lots of it. The door was indeed unlocked. Inside was a different world, warm, humid, bursting with life. Plants everywhere, flowering vines climbing the walls, fruit trees in large pots, herbs in neat rows, exotic flowers she didn't have names for. The air smelled like earth and growing things and possibility. "Can I help you, miss?" An older man emerged from behind a potted lemon tree, wiping soil-stained hands on his apron, weather-worn face, kind eyes, completely unfazed by her presence. "I'm looking for Thompson," Elara said. "That's me." He looked her over, then his eyebrows rose. "You must be Her Grace. The Duke said you might come." "He told you I'd be here?" "Sent word this morning. Said you were to have full access, and I was to answer any questions you had." Thompson smiled. "Welcome to the greenhouse, Your Grace. What would you like to know?" "Everything." It turned out, Elara spent 3 hours in that greenhouse, following Thompson around as he explained his work. What plants needed shade, which needed sun, how to propagate roses, the difference between annuals and perennials. He was patient with her ignorance and clearly delighted to have someone who actually wanted to learn. "His Grace comes here often," Thompson said as he showed her how to deadhead spent blooms. 2-3 times a week, works right alongside me, gets his hands dirty. I think he finds it peaceful." Elara tried to imagine the shadow from last night kneeling in the dirt, carefully tending flowers. It didn't match the image of the beast that London whispered about. "Has he always been interested in gardening?" Thompson's smile faded a bit. "Not always. Started about 10 years ago when he stopped going to London. I think he needed something living to take care of. He paused. He's a good man, Your Grace. Whatever stories you've heard, he's a good man. That's what Mrs. Hewitt had said too, and Graves, in his way. Everyone who actually knew the Duke defended him. It was the people who'd never met him who called him a monster. That night, Elara returned the Bronte novel to the library and found another book in its place. Emma. No note, but the message was clear. He was here. He'd seen she'd taken his recommendation. He'd left her another. This became their pattern. Days, Elara explored the estate, slowly learning its rhythms. The staff who were wary at first but warmed to her when they realized she wasn't going to cause trouble. The grounds that were dying from neglect but could be beautiful again. The greenhouse where she spent hours learning from Thompson. Nights, she went to the library. Sometimes the Duke was there, always in shadows, never showing his face. They'd talk, carefully at first, circling each other like wary animals. Books, mostly. What she was reading. What he recommended. Discussions that never got too personal, but felt personal anyway, in the way that talking about stories you love always does. Why do you like this one? She asked once, holding up a worn copy of Jane Eyre. The ending, he said from his corner. She comes back to him even after everything, even when he's broken. She comes back because she chooses to, not because she has to. Yes. A pause. That's the important part, isn't it? Choice. Elara thought about her own lack of choices. Yes. Other nights he wasn't there. She'd find books left for her anyway. Always something good. Always something that seemed chosen specifically for her. Gothic novels, poetry, history. He was learning what she liked. During the day, she never saw him, but she saw evidence of him everywhere. Fresh flowers in her room that she knew came from the greenhouse. A piano in the music room that had been tuned overnight after she'd mentioned she used to play. Books on landscape design appearing in the library after she'd asked Thompson about restoring the gardens. He was listening, paying attention, trying in his strange, hidden way to make her comfortable. Why won't he show himself? Elara asked Mrs. Hewitt one afternoon. The housekeeper's face went sad. Fear, I think, of being seen as something he's not, of being judged before he's even spoken. I wouldn't judge him. He doesn't know that yet, dear. 3 weeks into the marriage, Elara made a decision. That night, when she went to the library, she didn't pretend to browse the shelves. She walked straight to the corner where he always sat and stood there, looking directly at the shadows. I'd like to see you, she said. Silence. You're my husband, she continued. We live in the same house. We talk nearly every night, but I've never seen your face. I'd like to. Why? Because I'm tired of talking to shadows. She kept her voice gentle but firm. Because whatever you think I'll see, it can't be worse than the stories I've heard. Because you've been kind to me in ways you didn't have to be, and I'd like to actually look at you when I say thank you. More silence. Then, I'm not what you expect. I didn't expect any of this. She gestured at the room, the house, her whole strange new life. But here we are anyway. She heard him move. Rustling cloth. A sharp intake of breath like he was steeling himself. Then he stepped into the light. Elara's breath caught, but not for the reason he clearly expected. The Duke, Alistair Vane, wasn't a monster. He wasn't disfigured or scarred or anything London's rumors had suggested. He was beautiful. Painfully, almost unbearably beautiful. Dark hair that fell across his forehead, sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes the color of storm clouds. Features that belonged in a painting, the kind that made you ache just looking at them. No wonder he hid. You're not scarred, Elara said stupidly. A bitter smile touched his mouth, full lips, perfect like everything else about him. No. You're not disfigured. No. Then why? Because this is worse. The words came out sharp, years of pain behind them. You want to know why I hide, Elara? Because being beautiful is all anyone ever saw. Not my thoughts, not my work, not me. Just this. He gestured at his face with disgust. Society ladies who wanted a trophy. Men who wanted an advantageous connection. Everyone who looked at me saw a thing to be used, not a person. He turned away like he couldn't stand to be looked at. I got engaged 10 years ago to a woman I thought loved me, but she just loved how I looked on her arm. When she found out I wanted to leave London, live quietly, study architecture instead of playing society games, she left. Told everyone I was cruel, possessive, mad. Started the rumors that I was hiding something monstrous. His laugh was hollow. She wasn't wrong. I just became the monster after she left, not before. Elara's heart clenched. So you turned yourself into the beast, made people afraid so they'd leave you alone. It was easier than being seen as an ornament. He looked back at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her. Do you understand now? Why I didn't want you to see? She did. She absolutely did. Because she'd been the same thing, hadn't she? An object. A daughter to be sold, a debt to be paid, a thing to be traded. Neither of them had been seen as fully human by the world that used them. Thank you, she said quietly, for showing me. He looked startled. You're not disgusted? Disappointed? Why would I be? Because I'm not the tragic, disfigured duke from a novel. I'm just a coward who ran away. No. Elara stepped closer. You're a man who was hurt and found a way to survive it. That's not cowardice. That's human. Something shifted in his expression. The bitterness softened, replaced by something uncertain. Hopeful, maybe. I need to ask you something, Elara said, and I need an honest answer. He nodded. Did you agree to this marriage because you wanted a wife, or because you wanted another person to hide from the world with? Alistair was quiet for a long moment, then, I don't know, both, maybe. He met her eyes. I'm lonely, Elara. I've been lonely for 10 years. And when Pemberton proposed the arrangement, yes, I thought it would solve a problem, give me companionship without the risk of someone wanting me for the wrong reasons. Because I'm here out of obligation, not desire. Yes. He looked ashamed. That was my thinking. It's honest, at least. Elara took a breath. So where does that leave us? I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so human and unguarded that it hurt to watch. I know I don't want you to be unhappy. I know I've enjoyed our conversations, having someone to talk to again. You're kind, and you're clever, and you actually listen. He paused. What do you want, Elara? From this marriage? From me? No one had asked her that in so long. What did she want? She had to think about it. I want to not be afraid all the time. I want to matter to someone as more than a transaction. I want to do something with my life besides exist prettily in a cage, even if it's a nice one. Those are good wants. What do you want, Alistair? His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. He clearly felt it too because something flickered in his eyes. I want to stop being afraid too, he said, of being used, of being hurt. I want to... He trailed off, then tried again. I want someone to see me, really see me, not just what I look like. I want to be known. They stood there in the library, looking at each other, really looking, for the first time. Not a beast and his captive bride. Not a duke and his purchased wife. Just two people who'd been hurt and were tired of being afraid. We could try, Elara said slowly, to give each other what we want, not as strangers forced together, but as, I don't know, partners, people who choose to know each other. Choice. Alistair smiled, small but genuine. You mentioned that before, that it matters. It's the only thing that matters. Then I choose to try. He held out his hand, the same hand that had put the ring on her finger in the chapel, but different now. An offer, not an obligation. If you'll have me. Honestly this time. Elara looked at his hand, at his face, finally visible in the firelight, at the man who'd hidden from the world and was choosing, now, to be seen. She took his hand. Partners, she said. Partners, he agreed. And for the first time since she'd climbed into that black carriage 3 weeks ago, Elara felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest. Hope, Their agreement changed things, but not in the ways Elara expected. Alistair didn't suddenly become a conventional husband. He still took meals in his study, still disappeared for hours into parts of the house she hadn't explored. But now, when they crossed paths, he didn't hide. He'd nod, sometimes even stop to exchange a few words. Small things, normal things. Things that shouldn't have felt like victories but did. The library meetings continued, but different now. He'd sit across from her in the lamplight, no longer shrouded in shadows. They'd talk, about books still, but other things too. His architectural drawings, which he showed her one night with obvious nervousness, her ideas for the gardens, which he listened to with genuine interest, the mundane details of their days that couples probably shared all the time but felt precious to two people learning how. Thompson says the East Garden could be restored by spring if we start now, Elara said one evening, curled in her favorite chair with tea going cold beside her. Alistair looked up from the sketchbook he'd been working in. Do you want to restore it? I think so. It seems wrong to let something beautiful die when it could live again. Something flickered across his face. Then do it. Whatever you need, funds, workers, Thompson's time, it's yours. Just like that? It's your home too, Elara. You should make it what you want. Your home, not his home that she lived in. Theirs. But London, as it turned out, wasn't ready to let them have peace. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered with the regular post. Mrs. Hewitt brought it to Elara's sitting room, looking worried. It's addressed to you, Your Grace, from Lady Catherine Thornbury. Elara didn't recognize the name. She opened it anyway. My dear Duchess, how pleased we all were to hear of the Duke's marriage. Such a surprise after all these years. You must be quite remarkable to have drawn him from his seclusion. I do hope you'll attend Lady Pemberton's ball next month. It would be such a shame for London society to miss meeting you. Your devoted servant, Lady Catherine Thornbury. The words were kind. The tone was poisoned honey. Do you know her? Elara asked Mrs. Hewitt. I know of her. The housekeeper's mouth pressed into a thin line. She runs with Lady Pemberton's set, the women who were unkind to his grace before he left London. Before he left, before the broken engagement, the rumors, the retreat into isolation, Elara set the letter aside. I won't be attending any balls. But more letters came. Invitations to tea, to dinners, to social events Elara had no interest in attending. All phrased beautifully, all carrying that same undercurrent of false sweetness and real malice. They wanted to see the beast's bride, wanted to examine her like a curiosity in a menagerie. Alistair found her in the greenhouse a week later, surrounded by letters she'd been too angry to open. You don't have to respond to any of those, he said quietly. I wasn't planning to. Elara yanked a weed from the herb bed with more force than necessary. But they won't stop, will they? They'll keep pushing until they get what they want. Probably. He crouched beside her, careful not to crush the thyme she'd been transplanting. That's what society does. Pushes, tests, looks for weakness. I'm not weak. I know. He handed her a trowel she'd been reaching for. But you don't have to fight them either. We can just ignore them. Live our lives here. They'll get bored eventually. It was a reasonable suggestion, sensible even. But something in Elara rebelled against it. Your whole life changed because of rumors, she said, sitting back on her heels. Because someone hurt you, and you had no way to fight back except to disappear. Is that really what you want? To hide forever? Alistair's jaw tightened. It's kept me safe. Has it? Or has it just kept you alone? She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth. Too harsh, too direct. But Alistair didn't look angry. He looked considering. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet. Elara brushed dirt from her hands. But I'm tired of being afraid, and I think you are too. He didn't answer, just stood and walked out of the greenhouse, leaving her there with her plants and her anger and the uncomfortable feeling that she'd pushed too hard. That night, he didn't come to the library. Elara sat alone, pretending to read, actually just staring at the same page for an hour. Had she ruined it? The fragile partnership they'd been building? She was about to give up and go to bed when the door opened. Alistair stood there, still dressed for dinner, though she knew he'd eaten hours ago. He looked tired. I've been thinking about what you said. I'm sorry if I... Don't. He held up a hand. You were right. I am tired of being afraid. But going back to London... Elara, you don't know what it's like. The questions, the stares, the people who smile to your face and destroy you behind your back. Then don't go back the same way you left. She set her book aside. You left as someone running away. Go back as someone who has nothing to hide. With you. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. With me. He studied her for a long moment. You do that? Face them? They're just people, Alistair. Cruel people, maybe. But just people. They'll be cruel to you, too. Once they realize you're not what they expected. That you actually care about me. The admission hung in the air between them. Actually care about him. Did she? Elara thought about the past month, the conversations in the library, the way he'd quietly arranged everything she needed to be comfortable, how he listened when she talked about her ideas, never dismissing her as frivolous or silly, the architectural drawings he'd shown her, and the vulnerability in his eyes when he asked what she thought. Yes. Against all logic, against every reasonable expectation, she cared. Let them be cruel, she said. I can take it. You shouldn't have to. Neither should you. But here we are. Alistair crossed to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. There's something you should know about why the rumors were so effective. Why people believed I was a monster. Elara waited. The woman I was engaged to, Lady Victoria Ashford, she didn't just spread lies about me. She had help. Her family, the Ashfords, they're one of the most powerful in London. Connected to half the peerage. When she told people I was dangerous, unstable, hiding some terrible secret, they believed her. Because the Ashfords wanted them to believe. Why would they want that? Because I broke the engagement. He turned back to face her. Victoria thought she could change my mind about leaving London. When she realized she couldn't, when I told her I was done with society and wanted a different life, she couldn't accept it. It was a rejection, a humiliation. So she destroyed me instead. Elara's hands clenched. She sounds delightful. A ghost of a smile. She was beautiful, charming, accomplished, everything society said a duchess should be. And she was also calculating, vindictive, and utterly convinced that the world existed to serve her. Is she still in London? As far as I know, married someone else a few years ago, Lord Edward Pemberton. The name hit Elara like cold water. Pemberton, as in, the man who arranged our marriage, yes. Alistair's expression went hard. Victoria's husband holds your father's debts. Quite the coincidence, isn't it? It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. Elara's mind raced. She wanted this, Victoria. She wanted you married to someone you'd bought, someone beneath you socially, so she could, what, prove you'd sunk so low you had to purchase a wife? Probably. He looked grim. The Pembertons have been trying to get access to Thorncliffe for years. There's land they want, resources. If they could prove I was incompetent, unfit to manage my own affairs, they could challenge my control of the estate. But you married me. How does that help them? Because now they can say I'm desperate enough to buy a bride from a bankrupt family. They can paint me as pathetic, unstable, maybe argue that I need a conservator to manage my finances. He ran a hand through his hair. I knew it was a risk when I agreed to the arrangement, but I was lonely enough not to care. Elara stood, anger burning hot in her chest. So this whole thing, my family's debts, the marriage offer, everything, it was Victoria pulling strings, using my family as pawns to get at you? I think so. I can't prove it, but then we need to prove it. The words came out before Elara fully thought them through, but once they were out, she knew they were right. Alistair stared at her. What? We need to prove what they did. Expose them. Fight back. Elara, these people are dangerous. They've already destroyed my reputation once. If we go after them openly, what? They'll spread more rumors? Say terrible things about us? She crossed to him, close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. They're already doing that. We have nothing to lose. We have you to lose. Your safety, your reputation. I don't have a reputation. I'm the girl whose father sold her to the beast, remember? She softened her voice. I'm not afraid of them, Alistair, and you shouldn't be either. Not anymore. He looked at her like she was something rare and breakable. You really mean this? I really do. Why? Why would you fight for me? This isn't your battle. Isn't it? Elara gestured around the library, the house, the life they were building. They used me. Used my family. They probably planned for me to be miserable, or for you to be cruel, or for this whole thing to be a disaster they could point to as proof you'd lost your mind. Well, I'm tired of being used, and I'm tired of watching you hide from people who don't deserve your fear. Alistair was quiet for a long moment. Then, if we do this, if we actually try to fight back, it won't be easy. The Ashfords and Pembertons have resources we don't. Allies, influence. What do we have? He smiled, small but real. The truth. And apparently a wife with more courage than sense. I prefer strategically bold. Is that what we're calling it? Their eyes met, and something shifted. The air felt charged, electric. They were standing close. When had they gotten so close? And Elara could see the exact moment Alistair realized it too. He stepped back quickly. I should. It's late. You should rest. Alistair. We'll talk more tomorrow. Make plans. He was already moving toward the door, putting distance between them like the space itself had burned him. Good night, Elara. He was gone before she could respond. Elara stood alone in the library, heart pounding for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely. The next morning, they met in Alistair's study, a room Elara had never been invited into before. It was distinctly his, architectural drawings pinned to the walls, books stacked on every surface, a drafting table covered in half-finished sketches. If we're going to do this, Alistair said, spreading a sheet of paper across his desk, we need to be methodical, document everything. He'd already started. Names, dates, connections drawn in careful lines, the web of people and events that had led to their marriage. Elara leaned over the desk, studying his work. How do we prove Victoria orchestrated the debts? We probably can't, not directly, but we can prove the connection between Pemberton and the Ashfords, show that he had motive beyond simple business. Alistair tapped a name on the paper. Pemberton bought your father's debts from someone else. If we can find out who, trace the money back. We might find Victoria's fingerprints on it. Exactly. They worked through the morning, building their case piece by piece. Alistair sent careful letters to his solicitor in London, asking for information disguised as routine business inquiries. Elara wrote to her father, gently probing for details about when and how his debts had been sold. By afternoon, they had the skeleton of a plan. By evening, they had their first real lead. Alistair's solicitor wrote back faster than expected. The debts had originally been held by a gentleman named Robert Fairfax, known for buying up struggling estates. Fairfax had sold them to Pemberton for significantly less than their value, essentially giving them away. Why would he do that? Elara asked. Alistair was already flipping through his notes. Because Fairfax is Victoria's uncle. He manages her family's investments. There it was, the connection they needed. It's not proof, Alistair warned. Family members do business together all the time, but it's suspicious, especially when combined with the timing. Elara pointed to the dates he'd written down. My father's debts were sold 3 months before Pemberton approached him about the marriage arrangement. 3 months. That's not coincidence. That's planning. We need more, something concrete. Then we go to London. We talk to people. We find out what the Pembertons have been saying about you, about us. We look for inconsistencies in their story. Alistair looked up sharply. You want to go to London? Now? Why not? We've been married 2 months. It would be stranger if we never appeared in society. And if we're going to fight them, we need to see the battlefield. Elara, the moment we set foot in London, it starts. The scrutiny, the gossip. There's no going back from that. She met his eyes steadily. I'm not planning to go back. The decision, once made, moved quickly. They would go to London for the season, rent a townhouse. Alistair owned one but hadn't used it in years. Accept invitations, be seen. Let society examine the beast and his bride up close. And while they smiled and danced and played the part of a normal couple, they'd investigate. Carefully. Quietly. "We should accept Lady Pemberton's ball invitation," Elara said as they planned. "It's in 3 weeks. Gives us time to prepare." Alistair looked pained. "That's Victoria's set, the heart of the people who destroyed me before. Which is exactly why we should go. Show them you're not afraid, that we're not hiding. They'll be vicious to you. Let them try." The fierce protectiveness that flashed across Alistair's face made Elara's breath catch. "If anyone hurts you, I can handle myself," she said softly. "But thank you for caring." His expression shifted to something she couldn't quite read. "Of course I care. You're my wife." "Is that the only reason?" The question hung between them, too honest, too raw. Alistair looked away first. "We should start packing. The London house will need to be opened, staff hired. There's a lot to arrange." He was avoiding the question. Elara let him. For now. The week before they left for London, Elara received a visitor. She was in the East Garden, working alongside Thompson to plant the bulbs that would bloom in spring, when Graves appeared looking uncharacteristically flustered. "Your Grace, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says he's your brother." Elara's trowel fell from her hand. "My brother?" She had a brother, Thomas, 2 years older, who'd left for the Navy when their father's finances collapsed. She hadn't seen him in 3 years. Hadn't known if he'd even heard about her marriage. He was waiting in the front hall, still in his naval uniform, looking sun-weathered and out of place among the manor's dark elegance. "Tommy?" He turned, and his face broke into a grin that was achingly familiar. "Ellie, look at you, a duchess." She flew at him, propriety forgotten, and he caught her in a hug that smelled like salt water and tobacco. "What are you doing here?" she asked when she finally pulled back. "Got your letter." "Well, got Father's letter, then yours. Took leave to come see for myself that you were all right." His smile faded. "Are you all right?" "I am, truly." Thomas studied her with the same sharp eyes that had always seen through her childhood lies. "Father said you married the Duke of Vane, the man they call the Beast, I know." Elara linked her arm through his. "Come. I'll show you around, introduce you to my husband, and you can judge for yourself." They found Alistair in his study, bent over correspondence. He looked up when Elara knocked, and she saw the exact moment he registered the stranger with her, the instant wariness that crossed his face. "Alistair, this is my brother, Lieutenant Thomas Whitmore. Tommy, my husband, the Duke of Vane." The two men sized each other up, Thomas with the protective suspicion of a brother who'd heard the rumors, Alistair with the guarded caution of a man used to being judged. "Your Grace." Thomas bowed stiffly. "Lieutenant, welcome to Thorncliffe." Alistair's voice was carefully polite. "You must be tired from your journey. I'll have rooms prepared." "I appreciate that, Your Grace, but I'd like to speak with my sister, privately, if possible." Tension crackled in the air. "Of course," Alistair said after a beat. "Elara, the library is available. I have work to finish here." He was giving them space, being considerate, but Elara saw the hurt in his eyes as he turned back to his desk, shutting them out. In the library, Thomas didn't waste time. "What the hell happened? Ellie? Father's letter said you'd agreed to this marriage, but I know Father. I know the debts. Did he force you?" "It's complicated. Try me." So she did. Told him everything, the debts, the arrangement, the wedding, carefully left out the parts about Alistair hiding, about the rumors, about the complicated truth of their relationship. Thomas listened, jaw tight. "So he bought you. He saved our family by purchasing you like property." "I had a choice, Tommy. I could have said no." "Could you? Really?" He ran a hand through his hair, so like their father's gesture that it hurt. "Ellie, I've been gone 3 years trying to earn enough to help, and I come back to find you sold off to some recluse duke that London calls a monster." "He's not a monster." The words came out sharper than she meant. "He's kind. He's been nothing but respectful. He's given me freedom to do what I want with the estate. encouraged my interests, treated me as an equal partner. You're defending him because he deserves defending. Thomas stared at her. You care about him. It wasn't a question. Elara's throat tightened. I do. After 2 months of marriage to a stranger who bought you, it's not like that. Not anymore. She reached for words to explain. We were both trapped, Tommy. Both forced into this by circumstances. But we've chosen to make something real from it, something that matters. And he feels the same? Did he? Elara thought about Alistair's careful distance, the way he'd pull back whenever they got too close, how he'd said, "Of course I care, you're my wife," like duty was the only reason he needed. I think so, she said, less certain than she wanted to be. Thomas softened slightly. I want to believe you, Ellie. I do. But I'm your brother. It's my job to be suspicious of any man who... A crash from the hallway. Raised voices. Then Graves appeared in the doorway, pale. Your Grace, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been an incident. They found Alistair in the entrance hall, facing down 3 men Elara didn't recognize. Well-dressed, aristocratic, clearly drunk despite the early hour. Come now, Vane, one of them was saying, words slurred. Aren't you going to introduce us to your bride? We've come all this way to meet the woman desperate enough to marry the beast. Alistair's hands were clenched at his sides, his face a mask of rigid control. Leave, now. Aw, don't be like that. We're old friends, aren't we? Used to attend all the same parties. The speaker, a florid-faced man with thinning hair, grinned nastily. Before you became a hermit, anyway. Viscount Hadley, Alistair said, voice like ice. You're trespassing. Leave my property before I have you removed. Property? Hadley laughed. Is that what you call this crumbling pile? Or are you talking about your wife? I hear you bought her. How much did a duchess cost these days? Elara felt Thomas tense beside her, felt her own anger rising hot and sharp. But before either of them could move, Alistair did something she'd never seen. He smiled. Not a friendly smile. A dangerous one. The smile of a man who'd had enough. Hadley, I'd forgotten how tedious you are when you're drunk, which, as I recall, is always. He took a step forward, and despite the 3-to-1 odds, Hadley stepped back. You came here to gawk at the beast, didn't you? You and your idiot friends. Well, here I am. Look your fill. He spread his arms wide, letting them see him clearly in the bright entrance hall. Beautiful, composed, completely in control. Disappointed? Were you expecting horns? A tail? Some evidence of the monster you've been gossiping about for a decade? Another step forward. I'm going to tell you something, Hadley, and you're going to listen very carefully. Then you're going to leave and never set foot on my land again. Hadley's friends looked nervous now. One was already edging toward the door. I don't care what you think of me, Alistair continued, voice soft and deadly. I don't care what you say in your clubs and ballrooms, but my wife is off limits. Her name doesn't enter your mouth. Her reputation remains spotless. If I hear even a whisper of gossip about the Duchess of Vane, I will make it my personal mission to destroy you. Financially, socially, completely. You can't. I can. I'm still the Duke of Vane, Hadley. I still control more wealth and influence than you'll see in 3 lifetimes. I've just chosen not to use it. But for her? He glanced toward where Elara stood. I'll use every bit of it. Silence. Then Hadley tried to laugh it off. Big words from a man who hasn't shown his face in London in 10 years. That's about to change. Alistair's smile sharpened. We'll be attending Lady Pemberton's ball in 3 weeks. I suggest you find somewhere else to be that evening. Because if I see you there, if you even look at my wife the wrong way, I'll call you out. And unlike you, I actually know which end of a pistol to hold. Hadley went pale. Dueling was illegal but still happened, and Alistair had just threatened it in front of witnesses. You're mad. No, just done being afraid. Alistair gestured to Graves. Show these gentlemen out. If they return, call the magistrate. The 3 men left, Hadley blustering threats that everyone ignored. When the door closed behind them, Alistair's shoulders sagged slightly. The mask of control cracked just enough for Elara to see the man underneath. shaking slightly, adrenaline crashing. That was incredible, Thomas said quietly. Alistair looked startled, like he'd forgotten they were there. Tommy, this is my husband, Elara said, moving to Alistair's side. Alistair, my brother. I gathered. Alistair managed a real smile this time, though strained. Sorry you had to see that, Lieutenant. Not the best introduction. Are you joking? That was the best introduction. Thomas grinned. Anyone who threatens to shoot someone for my sister is all right by me. Some of the tension left Alistair's frame. I wouldn't actually shoot him. Probably. Shame. He deserves it. Elara looked between her husband and her brother, saw them starting to relax around each other, and felt something warm unfold in her chest. But that warmth was tempered by reality. Hadley would talk. Word would spread that the beast had emerged, that he'd threatened violence, that he was coming to London with his purchased bride. The battle they'd been planning had just started early, and Elara realized, standing there between the two men she cared about most, that she was ready for it. Let London talk. Let Victoria and her allies scheme. They'd just made their first mistake. They'd underestimated the beast, and they'd completely missed the more dangerous threat, his wife. News of Hadley's visit spread through London faster than fire through dry wood. By the time Elara and Alistair arrived in the city 2 weeks later, the story had been twisted, embellished, grown teeth. The beast had attacked 3 gentlemen who'd come to pay their respects. He'd threatened murder. He'd gone completely mad, just as everyone had always suspected. Their townhouse on Grosvenor Square, opened for the first time in a decade, became the subject of intense scrutiny. Carriages slowed as they passed. Pedestrians stopped to stare at the windows. A street vendor set up across the square selling broadsheets with lurid illustrations of a horned monster dragging a helpless woman into darkness. They've drawn you with fangs, Elara observed, looking out the window of their drawing room. Alistair, reviewing correspondence at his desk, didn't look up. At least they're creative. And apparently I'm unconscious in all of these. Do they think you've kidnapped me? Probably. He signed a letter with sharp, precise strokes. The unconscious bride makes for better drama than the truth. The truth being that Elara had spent the morning interviewing potential ladies' maids and the afternoon reviewing invitations with ruthless efficiency. She'd accepted exactly 3, Lady Pemberton's ball, a musicale hosted by a neutral party, and a garden party given by one of Alistair's few remaining allies from before his exile. Everything else went into the fire. We're supposed to be making a statement, she said, still watching the street. Being selective defeats the purpose. Being selective is the statement. Alistair finally looked up, his storm-gray eyes serious. If we accept every invitation, we look desperate, defensive. This way we choose our battlefield. Thomas, who'd accompanied them to London over Alistair's protests, lounged in a chair by the fire. He's right, Ellie. Strategic engagement. We learned it in the Navy. Never fight on terrain your enemy chooses. The 2 men had formed an unlikely alliance over the past 2 weeks. Thomas seemed to have appointed himself Elara's personal guardian, much to Alistair's initial irritation. But somewhere between planning their London campaign and Thomas's cheerful willingness to say exactly what he thought, they'd found common ground. The Pemberton ball is in 3 days, Elara said. Do we have enough? Alistair gestured to a stack of papers. My solicitor found 2 more connections between Fairfax and Pemberton, business deals that make no financial sense unless you factor in family loyalty. And one of the servants at the Pemberton house is willing to talk, for a price. What kind of information? Letters. Victoria apparently isn't careful about what she leaves lying around. The maid's been keeping copies. Elara's pulse quickened. When can we meet her? Tomorrow night, discreetly. He hesitated. She's taking a risk. If the Pembertons find out, then we make sure they don't. Elara crossed to the desk, studying the web of evidence Alistair had been building. It was more extensive than she'd realized. Dates, transactions, testimonies from people who'd witnessed Victoria's manipulation. This is good work. It's circumstantial. Nothing that would hold up in court. We're not going to court. We're going to a ballroom. She met his eyes. Court of public opinion, different rules. A knock at the door. Their butler, newly hired since the old staff had scattered during Alistair's absence, entered with a card on a silver tray. Visitors, Your Grace, a Lady Ashford and her daughter. The temperature in the room plummeted. Victoria was here. Alistair stood slowly, his face going carefully blank. Show them in, Elara cut him off. Elara, we were going to face her eventually. Might as well be on our terms, in our house. She smoothed her dress, lifted her chin. Besides, I'm curious. Thomas was on his feet, hand instinctively moving toward where his sword would be if he were in uniform. Want me to stay? Yes, Elara said, at the same time Alistair said, no. They looked at each other. Yes, Elara repeated firmly. Witness, will want one. Alistair's jaw worked, but he nodded. Fine, but Thomas, please try not to start a brawl in my drawing room. No promises. The door opened again. The butler announced, Lady Victoria Pemberton and Lady Margaret Ashford. Victoria Ashford, no, Pemberton now, swept in like she owned the place. And she was everything Elara had imagined and worse. Beautiful. Stunningly so. Golden hair perfectly arranged, skin like porcelain. A figure that made her green silk dress look like it had been painted on. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been denied anything in her life. Her mother was a sharper, older version, same cold eyes, same calculating smile. Alistair. Victoria's voice was honey and poison. It's been so long, you look well. Lady Pemberton. Alistair's tone could have frozen water. To what do I owe this unexpected visit? Can't old friends call on each other? Her eyes slid to Elara, assessing. And this must be your new Duchess. How charming. I've been dying to meet you. Dying, what an interesting choice of words. Lady Pemberton, Elara said coolly. Lady Ashford, please, sit. She gestured to the chairs furthest from Alistair. A subtle thing, but Victoria noticed. Her smile sharpened. I won't keep you long, Victoria said, settling into her seat with practiced grace. I simply wanted to welcome you to London. Society can be so overwhelming for newcomers, and I'd hate for you to feel lost. How thoughtful. Of course, it helps to have guidance, someone who understands how things work, the unwritten rules, so to speak. Victoria's gaze flicked to Alistair. I understand there was an unfortunate incident at Thorncliffe. Viscount Hadley mentioned it. Such a terrible misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Alistair said flatly. Hadley was drunk, insulting, and trespassing. I asked him to leave, repeatedly. Still, threatening to shoot him seems rather extreme, don't you think? People are talking. Let them talk. Victoria's eyes glittered. They're saying you've become unstable. That isolation has affected your judgment. Some are even suggesting you might be unfit to manage your affairs. Barsh, Ishamoshem. There it was. The real reason for this visit. Not welcome, but warning, or threat. Lady Ashford spoke for the first time, her voice like crushed velvet over steel. It would be unfortunate if such rumors gained traction. For your sake, Your Grace, and for your families. Elara felt Thomas tense beside her, felt her own anger rising, hot and sharp. But before she could speak, Alistair laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of a man who'd finally seen through a magic trick and found it pathetically simple. Let me save you some time, Lady Ashford. Yes, you and your daughter orchestrated my marriage. You manipulated the debts, arranged the circumstances, probably hoped I'd either refuse and look like a heartless monster or accept and look like a desperate fool. He stood, looking down at them. What you didn't plan for was that my wife is smarter than both of you combined. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Just like you had no idea how your uncle came to own the Whitmore debts, or how your husband came to purchase them at such a convenient discount, or how the timing coincided perfectly with your campaign to paint me as a reclusive madman. Alistair moved to stand beside Elara's chair. Tell me, Victoria, when you planned all this, did you actually think it would work? You're delusional. But her voice had gone cold, sharp. The honey completely gone. Am I? Then why are you here? If I'm just a madman shouting at clouds, why bother visiting at all? He smiled, and it was the same dangerous smile he'd used on Hadley. You're here because you're worried, because you heard we were coming to your ball and you can't figure out what we're planning. De quoi sommes trotting? Lady Ashford stood abruptly. We came as a courtesy. I see it was wasted. Victoria, we're leaving. Not quite yet. Elara rose as well, meeting Victoria's eyes directly. I have something to say first. The room went silent. You used me, Elara said quietly. Used my family. Put my father in debt, my mother's health at risk. Forced me into a marriage you designed to hurt the man you claimed to love. All because he wouldn't give you what you wanted. I'm not finished. Elara's voice didn't rise, but it cut clean through Victoria's protest. You thought I'd be broken, miserable. Maybe you imagined I'd run away like your other victims, give you more proof that Alistair was a monster. Or maybe you just wanted me to suffer because it amused you. Victoria's face had gone white with rage. But here's what you didn't count on, Elara continued. I'm not afraid of you. I don't care about your influence or your connections or your pretty face. And unlike you, I actually know my husband. The real man, not the myth you created. How touching! Victoria's voice dripped venom. The purchased bride defending her owner. Does he keep you on a leash or do you kneel willingly? Thomas surged forward, but Alistair was faster. He stepped between Victoria and Elara, and the look on his face made Lady Ashford actually gasp. Get out, he said, voice deadly quiet. Get out of my house. Now. Gladly. Victoria was already moving toward the door. Enjoy the ball, darling. I've made sure everyone worth knowing will be there, and they're all very eager to meet your little project. We'll see you there, Elara called after her. Try not to wear green again. It really isn't your color. It was a silly insult, petty and small, but it hit. Victoria's spine went rigid, and she left without another word. When the door closed, silence crashed down. Then Thomas started laughing. That last bit, the green dress, brilliant. I thought so. Elara sank back into her chair, hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. Was I too much? You were perfect. Alistair was still standing, still tense. But Elara, you just made an enemy of the most vindictive woman in London. She was already my enemy. Now she knows I know it. This changes things. They'll be ready for us at the ball. Whatever we were planning, we stick to the plan. Elara looked up at him. We go. We smile. We dance. We show them we're not afraid. And when the moment's right, we hit them with everything we have. Alistair studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but we need those letters from the maid. Without concrete evidence, it's just our word against theirs. Then we make sure we get them. The meeting with the Pemberton maid happened the next night in a tavern near the docks, neutral ground, away from prying eyes. The woman was young, nervous, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. She'd brought a package wrapped in oilcloth. These are copies, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I kept the originals in her ladyship's correspondence. She'll never know they're missing. Alistair opened the package carefully. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Victoria's handwriting, elegant and damning. One to her uncle. Make sure the Whitmore debts are substantial enough that they're desperate. I want them to have no choice. Another to Pemberton, before their marriage. Once he's married to some nobody, we can move forward with challenging his competency. A man desperate enough to buy a wife is clearly unstable. A third to someone named Lord Hartwick. Keep spreading the stories about his isolation. The more monstrous he seems, the better. By the time we're done, no one will believe a word he says. It was all there. The conspiracy, the manipulation, the calculated cruelty. This is it, Elara breathed. This is everything we need. The maid shifted uncomfortably. My payment, Your Grace. Alistair handed her a purse heavy with coins. As promised, plus extra for your discretion. And if they find out They won't. We'll make sure of it. He paused. But if you're worried, I can arrange employment elsewhere, outside the Pembertons' reach. The woman's eyes went wide. You'd do that? You've helped us. It's the least I can do. She left with the promise of a position in Alistair's household, away from London, away from Victoria's revenge. Back in the carriage, Elara reread the letters by lamplight. We can't just show these at the ball. It would look like we're attacking. We are attacking. Yes, but we need to look like we're defending, like we've been forced to reveal the truth. She tapped the letters thoughtfully. What if someone else discovered them? Someone neutral? Respected? Thomas, riding with them, leaned forward. Like who? Like Lady Ashford herself. Elara's mind was racing now. Victoria keeps her correspondence at her mother's house, doesn't she? What if these letters were found there during the ball? What if Lady Ashford herself had to confront what her daughter has been doing? Alistair stared at her. That's brilliant and completely insane. How would we even… I don't know yet, but we have 2 days to figure it out. Those 2 days passed in a blur of planning, preparation, and growing tension. Alistair's solicitor confirmed that Lady Ashford was hosting a pre-ball reception at her townhouse. Victoria would be there, along with most of London's elite. The ball itself would follow at the Pemberton estate. If we can get these letters into Lady Ashford's hands during the reception, Elara said, studying the layout Alistair had sketched, in front of witnesses, she'd have to acknowledge them, probably even distance herself from Victoria to protect her own reputation. Alistair added another notation to his sketch. But we'd need access to the house, a way to ensure the letters are found publicly, not hidden away. Leave that to me, Thomas said. Both Alistair and Elara looked at him. I'm a naval officer. We're trained in infiltration, reconnaissance. Getting into a society party? That's easier than boarding a French ship under fire. He grinned. Besides, I'm charming. People trust me. Absolutely not, Elara said immediately. Ellie, you need someone they don't know. Someone who can move around without raising suspicion. I'm perfect for this. You're my brother. If they catch you, they won't. His grin faded into something more serious. Let me help. Let me do something besides stand around looking decorative. Elara looked at Alistair. He looked back, clearly torn. It's risky, Alistair said finally. But it could work. If Thomas can get into the reception, plant the letters somewhere Lady Ashford will find them. Her study, maybe, and create a situation where she has to open them in front of guests. We'd need a distraction, Elara said slowly. Something to draw attention to the study at exactly the right moment. They spent the next day refining the plan. Thomas would attend the reception as himself. A naval officer, Elara's brother, perfectly acceptable guest. He'd arrive early, charm his way through the crowd, and find an opportunity to plant the letters in Lady Ashford's private study. Meanwhile, Elara and Alistair would arrive slightly late, make an entrance, ensure all eyes were on them. At a predetermined signal, Thomas would create a distraction, a spilled drink, a loud conversation, something to draw Lady Ashford to her study where she'd find the letters. In front of witnesses, in front of everyone. What if she doesn't open them? Elara asked. She will. Alistair's expression was grim. The envelope will be marked with her husband's seal. She'll think it's urgent business he left for her. You're forging a seal? I'm very talented. The night of the ball arrived cold and clear. Elara dressed in a gown she'd commissioned specifically for this moment. Deep blue silk that made her skin glow, cut to perfection, expensive enough to make a statement. Her maid arranged her hair in an elaborate style, woven through with pearls. She looked every inch a duchess. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. You look terrifying, Thomas said when he came to escort her downstairs. He was in his dress uniform, medals gleaming. In the best possible way. I feel like I'm going to be sick. That's normal. Right before a battle, everyone feels like that. The trick is not to show it. He offered his arm. Ready? No, let's go anyway. Alistair was waiting in the entrance hall. He dressed in formal black, his cravat perfectly tied, his dark hair brushed back from his face. He looked devastating, powerful, nothing like the reclusive beast London expected. When he saw Elara, he went very still. Is it too much? She asked, suddenly uncertain. No. His voice came out rough. It's perfect. You're perfect. The moment stretched, charged with something neither of them could name. Thomas cleared his throat. Carriage is ready. We should go before I vomit from nerves. That's encouraging, Alistair muttered, but he was smiling slightly. They rode to the Ashford townhouse in tense silence. Thomas reviewed the plan under his breath. Alistair stared out the window, jaw tight. Elara tried to breathe normally and failed. This was it. The beginning of the end, one way or another. The Ashford house blazed with light, carriages lined up to discharge their passengers. London's elite, dressed in their finest, streaming inside to watch the spectacle. The beast and his bride finally emerged from hiding. Thomas went in first, disappearing into the crowd. Elara and Alistair waited in the carriage, watching the clock. "We can still leave," Alistair said quietly. "Go back to Thorncliffe. Forget all of this." "Do you want to?" "No. But I want you to have the choice." Elara looked at him. This man who'd been hurt so badly, who'd hidden for so long, who was about to walk into a room full of people who'd destroyed him once and would happily do it again. This man who'd given her freedom when he could have demanded submission, who'd listened when he could have dismissed her, who'd seen her as a partner when the world saw her as property. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you. I choose us." His hand found hers in the darkness of the carriage, squeezed once. "Then let's give them a show." They stepped out of the carriage together. The crowd on the steps went silent, every head turned. Elara lifted her chin and took Alistair's arm. They walked up the stairs in that silence, through a gauntlet of stares and whispers. The beast had emerged, and he'd brought his duchess. Inside the reception hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers, silk wall coverings, flowers everywhere. And people. So many people, all of them turning to look. Lady Ashford appeared, her smile tight. "Your Grace, how delightful you could attend." "Lady Ashford," Alistair's voice was perfectly polite. "Thank you for the invitation." "And Your Grace," Lady Ashford turned to Elara. "You look lovely. That color suits you." "Thank you. Your home is beautiful." The pleasantries were a knife fight in velvet gloves. Victoria appeared at her mother's elbow, resplendent in gold that should have looked garish but somehow didn't. Her smile was all teeth. "Alistair, how brave of you to come." Her eyes slid to Elara. "Both of you." "We wouldn't miss it," Elara said sweetly. Across the room she caught a glimpse of Thomas near the staircase. He gave the slightest nod. He was in position. Now they just had to wait for the right moment. The next hour was torture. Elara and Alistair circulated through the room, accepting congratulations that felt like condolences, making polite conversation with people who clearly thought they were witnessing a slow-motion disaster. Some were openly hostile, others simply curious. A few, a very few, seemed genuinely pleased to see Alistair back in society. "Don't let them grind you down," one elderly countess said, gripping Elara's hand with surprising strength. "Half these vultures fed on Alistair's reputation for years. Good to see him fighting back." It was something. Alistair was tense beside her, responding to questions with careful precision, never showing weakness, never showing fear. But Elara could feel the strain in the rigid set of his shoulders, the careful distance he kept from most guests. This was costing him. Finally, Thomas caught Elara's eye from across the room. He tapped his watch. Time. Elara turned to Lady Ashford, who was holding court near the fireplace. "Lady Ashford, I wonder if I might beg a moment. I've heard your collection of French paintings is extraordinary, and I'd love your thoughts on restoration techniques." It was a transparent excuse, but Lady Ashford's pride won out over suspicion. "Of course, my dear. They're in my private study. This way." She led Elara and, because he refused to leave her side, Alistair toward a hallway off the main room. Several guests followed, curious. Perfect. The study was smaller than the reception rooms, but no less elegant. And there, on Lady Ashford's desk, was an envelope marked with the Ashford seal. Lady Ashford frowned. "I don't recall leaving. Excuse me one moment." She crossed to the desk and opened the envelope, pulled out the letters, started reading. Elara watched her face go from confusion to horror to fury in the span of 30 seconds. "Where did these come from?" Lady Ashford's voice cracked like a whip. "What are they?" someone asked. Lady Ashford looked up at the small crowd in her doorway, at Elara and Alistair, at Victoria, who'd followed them in. "They're letters," Lady Ashford said slowly, "from my daughter, detailing a rather elaborate conspiracy." Victoria went white. Mother, I don't know what... Be quiet. Lady Ashford's voice could have cut glass. She held up one of the letters. To your uncle, instructing him to manipulate the Whitmore family's debts. And here, another letter. To your husband, planning to challenge the Duke of Vane's competency based on his marriage. Marriage you arranged. The room had gone deadly silent. This isn't what it looks like, Victoria tried. No? Lady Ashford's hand shook with rage. Then please, explain to me what it looks like when my daughter orchestrates fraud, defamation, and conspiracy against a peer of the realm. He deserved it. Victoria's composure finally shattered. He humiliated me, rejected me, chose exile over marrying me. I was going to be a duchess, and he threw it away. So you destroyed him instead, Elara said quietly. Victoria spun on her. What would you know about it? You're nobody. A bankrupt merchant's daughter who got lucky enough to be sold to a duke too pathetic to find a real wife. Victoria! Lady Ashford's voice was thunder. But the damage was done. Victoria had just admitted everything in front of 24 witnesses, including several men who looked very interested in what they'd just heard. These letters, one of them said, stepping forward. He was older, distinguished, someone important. They described criminal conspiracy, fraud at minimum. Lord Chancellor, Lady Ashford said, and her voice was defeated. I had no knowledge. I believe you, Margaret, but your daughter will need to answer for this. The Lord Chancellor took the letters with careful hands, as will Lord Pemberton if he was complicit. Victoria backed toward the door. You can't... I'm a Pemberton now. You can't touch me. We can, the Lord Chancellor said grimly, and we will. Chaos erupted. Victoria fled the room. Lady Ashford sank into her chair, years seeming to fall on her all at once. Guests crowded in, everyone talking, the scandal already spreading like wildfire. Elara felt Alistair's hand at her back, steady and warm. They'd done it. The truth was out, but as they made their way through the crowd toward the exit, Elara caught sight of Victoria across the entrance hall. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing very still, looking directly at Elara, and the expression on her face wasn't defeat. It was pure, concentrated hatred. We need to leave, Elara said urgently. I know. Alistair was already guiding her toward the door. They found their carriage, found Thomas already waiting inside. Did it work? He asked. Too well, Alistair said. The carriage lurched into motion. They made it 3 blocks before the shots rang out. Glass exploded inward. Thomas swore and yanked Elara down. Alistair threw himself over both of them as the carriage driver screamed and the horses bolted. The world became noise and chaos and terror. More gunfire. The carriage tilting dangerously. Someone shouting orders, the smell of gunpowder and fear. Then they crashed. The impact threw Elara against the wall, her head cracking against wood. Stars exploded across her vision. She tasted blood. Elara! Alistair's voice, desperate and far away. Hands pulling her from the wreckage. Cold night air. The distant sound of running footsteps. She tried to open her eyes, managed it for just a second. Long enough to see Alistair's face, terrified and covered in blood. Long enough to hear him say, "Stay with me, please. Stay with me." Then darkness took her down. Then, pain dragged Elara back to consciousness like hooks in her skin. Her head throbbed. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Somewhere close, voices spoke in urgent whispers. Concussion at minimum, possibly cracked ribs. We won't know about internal bleeding until... I don't care what it takes. Fix her. That was Alistair's voice, raw, desperate, nothing like his usual careful control. Elara forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus slowly. Unfamiliar ceiling, expensive wallpaper, the acrid smell of medicine. Not a hospital. Their townhouse. Alistair? She managed. Her voice came out like sandpaper. He was beside her instantly, his face haggard. There was dried blood on his collar, a bruise darkening his cheekbone. Don't move. The doctor said, Are you hurt? She tried to sit up. White, hot pain lanced through her side and she gasped. I told you not to move. But his hands were gentle as he eased her back down. I'm fine. You're the one who cracked your skull against the carriage wall. Memory flooded back. The gunshots. The crash. Tommy? Broken arm. Some cuts. He's downstairs terrorizing the servants by insisting he's well enough to stand guard. Alistair's attempt at lightness fell flat. His hands were shaking. Elara, you were unconscious for 6 hours. I thought... His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you. Takes more than a carriage crash to kill me. This wasn't an accident. The fear in his eyes hardened into fury. Someone shot at us. Deliberately. The driver's dead. The horses had to be put down. If Thomas hadn't pulled you down when he did, that first shot would have... He couldn't finish. Elara reached for his hand, ignoring the protest from her ribs. But it didn't. I'm here. We're both here. The doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. Your Grace, I need to examine her properly. If you could give us a moment. Alistair looked like he'd rather cut off his own arm, but he nodded and stepped back. The examination was thorough and painful. Cracked rib on the left side. Concussion. Various cuts and bruises. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to keep her in bed for at least a week. You were lucky, the doctor said as he packed his supplies. Very lucky. After he left, Alistair returned. He'd cleaned up, washed the blood away, changed his clothes, but he still looked wrecked. Tell me everything, Elara said. So he did. After the crash, he and Thomas had fought off their attackers. 3 men, hired thugs by the look of them. One was dead, killed by Thomas. The other 2 had fled when a patrol came by. The magistrate had been called. Questions asked. No one had answers yet. But we know who sent them, Alistair said grimly. Victoria, or Pemberton. Maybe both. Can they prove it? Not yet. The surviving attackers scattered. Could be anyone's hired muscle. He rubbed his face. But Lord Chancellor Hartwick is taking it seriously. There's going to be an investigation. Official this time, not just society gossip. Because trying to murder a duchess is a bit harder to ignore than spreading rumors. Exactly. He managed a weak smile. You've managed to make yourself important enough that people care if you're shot at. Congratulations. A knock at the door. Thomas entered, his left arm in a sling, sporting a spectacular black eye. You're awake, thank all the saints. Tommy, you look terrible. You should see the other guy. Oh wait, you can't. He's dead. He crossed to her bedside, his good hand gripping hers tightly. Scared me, Ellie. When you wouldn't wake up, I thought, I know, I'm sorry. Don't apologize for getting shot at. That's definitely not your fault. He glanced at Alistair. We've got a problem, though. News is spreading fast. Half of London thinks the Duke finally snapped and staged the whole thing for attention. The other half thinks it's proof he's cursed and everyone around him suffers. Of course they do. Elara's head throbbed. What about the letters? Lady Ashford's exposure? Still making waves. Lord Chancellor has them. Pemberton's being questioned. Victoria's nowhere to be found. She fled her mother's house right after we left. Thomas's expression darkened. But people are conflating the 2 events. Some think the attack proves Victoria was right to destroy Alistair's reputation, that he's dangerous. That's insane. It's London. Alistair stood, began pacing. Logic doesn't matter. Narrative does, and right now the narrative is that I brought my wife to the city, and within days she was nearly killed. Then we changed the narrative. Elara pushed herself up, ignoring both men's protests. We don't hide, we don't run, we finish what we started. Elara, you have a concussion. I can think with a concussion. I can plan. I can fight. She met Alistair's eyes. They tried to kill me. They failed. Now I'm angry. Thomas grinned despite himself. There's my sister. Over the next 3 days, Elara recovered in bed while London exploded around them. The Lord Chancellor's investigation uncovered a payment trail, funds from a Pemberton account to known criminals, made the day before the attack. Pemberton himself claimed ignorance, said his wife must have arranged it without his knowledge. Victoria remained missing. Meanwhile, public opinion fractured into camps. Some believed the Vanes were victims of a vicious conspiracy. Others insisted Alistair had orchestrated everything for sympathy. A few thought both sides were lying and the truth was somewhere worse. We need to make a statement, Elara said on the 3rd day. sitting up in bed surrounded by newspapers. Public, clear, before this spins completely out of control. What kind of statement? Alistair was working at the desk he'd moved into her room, refusing to leave her alone for more than a few minutes. The truth. All of it. Why you left London. What Victoria did. How they manipulated my family. The attack. Elara set the papers aside. People are making up stories because they don't have facts. Let's give them facts. That's unprecedented. Dukes don't air private grievances publicly. When's the last time a duke was nearly murdered in the street along with his wife? Thomas, who'd become a permanent fixture in the room, looked up from cleaning his pistol. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented actions. Alistair looked torn. If we do this, there's no taking it back. Every detail becomes public knowledge. Your family's debts, Elara. Your father's shame, your mother's illness. I know. She'd thought about this. But secrets are what gave Victoria power. Shame is what made you hide. Maybe it's time we stop letting those things control us. The aristocracy will call you vulgar, unseemly. They'll say you're airing dirty laundry for attention. Let them. I'd rather be vulgar and alive than proper and dead. Alistair studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his face. You're terrifying, you know that? I've been told. They spent the next day crafting their statement. Not a dry legal document, but a narrative. Their story told their way. Alistair wrote about his engagement to Victoria, how she'd demanded he abandon his interests, his wishes for a quieter life, how her rejection had poisoned London society against him, how he'd retreated not from cowardice but from exhaustion. Elara wrote about her family, her father's gambling debts that weren't really gambling. He'd been cheated by men connected to the Ashfords. Her mother's declining health, the impossible choice she'd faced. Together, they wrote about their marriage, the arrangement that had seemed cold and transactional, how they'd chosen to build something real from it anyway, how they'd discovered the conspiracy and decided to fight back. This is good, Thomas said, reading over the final draft. It's human. People will connect to it. Or they'll tear us apart for being weak. Alistair set down his pen. Admitting Victoria hurt me, that I ran away. That's not exactly the image of a strong duke. Strength isn't pretending you were never wounded. Elara took his hand. It's showing the scars and fighting anyway. The statement was published in the Times, the Morning Post, and 3 other major papers simultaneously. They'd paid for prominent placement, made sure it couldn't be ignored. The response was immediate and explosive. Some praised their honesty. Others condemned it as melodrama. But everyone read it. Everyone talked about it. And slowly, carefully, the narrative began to shift. Because what they'd written wasn't a defense. It was an accusation. Against Victoria. Against the Ashfords. Against every member of society who'd participated in the rumor-mongering, the casual cruelty, the systematic destruction of a man's reputation for entertainment. You've made them look at themselves, the elderly countess who'd spoken to Elara at the reception said when she visited. Made them confront what they did. Some won't forgive you for that. I can live with that, Elara said. Good. Because the ones who matter, the ones with actual integrity, they're starting to come around. She patted Elara's hand. Lady Ashford publicly denounced her daughter this morning, cut her off financially. That's significant. It was. Lady Ashford was protecting her own reputation, yes, but she was also acknowledging what her daughter had done, giving weight to the Vane's version of events. Other defections followed. Lord Pemberton, facing criminal charges, gave testimony against Victoria to save himself. Admitted she'd planned the debt manipulation, the conspiracy, possibly even the attack, though he swore he'd known nothing about that. 3 of Victoria's closest friends issued statements distancing themselves from her. Society's finest, rats leaving a sinking ship. It's working, Thomas reported on the 5th day. You should see the clubs. Everyone's talking about the Vanes. Half of them think you're heroes. The other half think you're scandalous, but they respect the audacity. And Victoria? Alistair asked. Still missing, but there's a warrant out now. Conspiracy to commit murder. She can't hide forever. That night, Elara finally felt well enough to leave her room. Alistair helped her down to dinner, careful of her still healing ribs. The dining room felt different, warmer, like a house that was becoming a home. "I've been thinking," Elara said as they ate, "about what happens next." "Next?" Alistair looked up from his plate. "After this. After Victoria's caught. After the investigation ends. What do we do?" "I assumed we'd return to Thorncliffe. You need to recover properly, and London is—" He gestured vaguely. "This. I don't want to hide anymore." The words came out more firmly than she'd intended. "And I don't think you do either. Not really." Alistair was quiet for a moment. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we stay. Part of the year, at least. We rebuild your reputation properly. We participate in society. We show them that we're not going anywhere." She set down her fork. "We won. We fought them and won. But if we run back to Thorncliffe now, we're still letting fear control us. I'm not afraid anymore. Prove it." The challenge hung in the air. Then Alistair laughed. A real laugh, startled and genuine. "You're right. You're absolutely right. We should stay. Throw a ball of our own, rub their noses in it. I was thinking something more subtle. No, you were right the first time. Audacity." His eyes gleamed. "Let's give them something to really talk about." The invitations went out a week later. The Duke and Duchess of Vane requested the honor of London society's presence at a ball celebrating their marriage. 2 weeks hence. Full formal dress, RSVP required. "They'll think we're insane," Thomas said, looking at the guest list they'd compiled. "Probably," Elara agreed, "but they'll come anyway. They won't be able to resist." She was right. Acceptances flooded in. Curiosity won out over caution. People wanted to see the couple who'd survived an assassination attempt and come back swinging, wanted to witness whatever drama might unfold, wanted to see if the beast would finally break. They had 2 weeks to prepare. Elara, still recovering but refusing to rest, threw herself into planning. Flowers, music, menu, seating arrangements. Every detail had to be perfect, had to send a message. We're not victims. We're not hiding. We're here, and we're staying. Alistair hired extra security, veterans from Thomas's naval contacts, men who knew how to watch for threats. The townhouse became a fortress disguised as a party venue. "If Victoria tries anything," Alistair started. "She won't." Elara was arranging flowers in the ballroom, supervised by a very nervous florist. "She's too smart. Too much attention on her now. She'll wait until we let our guard down. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be. I'm just being realistic." She stepped back to examine her work. "These need more white roses, and move that arrangement 6 inches to the left. You're enjoying this. I'm terrified, but yes, also enjoying it." She turned to face him. "Is that strange?" "No. I think I understand." Alistair moved to stand beside her, looking around the ballroom that was slowly transforming. "We're taking something back. Control. Power. Our own story." "Exactly." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching servants work, music drifting in from somewhere as the musicians practiced. "Elara," Alistair said quietly, "when this is over, when the ball is done, when Victoria is caught, I want to talk. About us." Her heart kicked up. "About us?" "About what we are. What we could be." He didn't look at her, kept his eyes on the ballroom. "This started as an arrangement, became a partnership. But lately I've been wondering if it might be more?" "Yes." Elara's breath caught, but before she could respond, Thomas burst into the room. "She's been found! Victoria! They've arrested her." Everything else vanished. They rushed to the study where Alistair's solicitor was waiting with news. Victoria had been discovered in Dover, trying to board a ship to France. The magistrate's men had taken her into custody. She was being brought back to London to face charges. Conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud. The solicitor ticked them off. Pemberton's testimony sealed it, plus the maid's evidence, your statement, the financial records. The case against her is substantial. "Will it hold?" Alistair asked. "Barring some miracle?" "Yes. She'll likely face prison. Her reputation is destroyed regardless." Prison. Victoria Ashford Pemberton, The golden girl of London society, headed for prison. It should have felt like victory, and it did, partially. But Elara also felt something else, something uncomfortably close to pity. She did this to herself, Thomas said, reading Elara's expression. Don't waste sympathy on someone who tried to kill you. I'm not sympathizing, I'm just thinking about how much she threw away. For what? Revenge? Pride? Some people can't stand losing, Alistair said quietly. They'll burn everything down rather than admit defeat. Is that what you would have done, if I hadn't pushed you to fight back? He considered this. I don't know. Maybe. I was halfway there when you arrived. He met her eyes. You saved me from becoming that. The moment stretched between them, weighted with things unsaid. The solicitor cleared his throat. There's one more thing. Victoria asked to see you, both of you, before the trial. Absolutely not, Thomas said immediately, but Elara was already nodding. Yes, we'll see her. Elara, I want to hear what she has to say, face to face. No more letters, no more intermediaries. She looked at Alistair. Don't you? He didn't answer right away. Then, yes, I think I do. The meeting was arranged for the next morning at the magistrate's office. Victoria would be brought under guard. They'd have 15 minutes. Elara dressed carefully, not her finest, but good enough. Armor of a different kind. In the carriage, Alistair was silent, tense. You don't have to do this, Elara said. Yes, I do. I need to see her, need to understand why she… He stopped. Maybe there's no understanding it. Maybe she's just cruel. People are rarely just one thing. The magistrate's office was cold and official. They were shown to a small room with a table and chairs. Guards stood at the door. Victoria was brought in moments later. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her hair wasn't perfectly arranged. Her dress was simple, almost plain, but her eyes, those were the same, sharp, calculating, furious. Alistair. She said his name like a curse. And the brave little duchess who destroyed me. How domestic. You destroyed yourself, Elara said evenly. We just stopped pretending we didn't see it. Victoria's laugh was brittle. Such conviction, such righteousness. You must be very proud of yourselves. We didn't come here for your mockery, Alistair said. You asked to see us. Why? For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped. Elara saw something raw underneath. Pain, maybe, or regret. I wanted to look at you, Victoria said finally, to see the man who threw away everything we could have had, and to see the woman he chose instead. Her eyes raked over Elara with contempt. I wanted to understand what you saw in her that you didn't see in me. She sees me, Alistair said simply. Not my title, not my appearance, not what I could do for her, just me. How touching. But Victoria's voice shook slightly. And that's worth all this? Worth becoming a social pariah? Worth hiding in the country like a hermit? Yes. The single word landed like a stone in still water. Victoria flinched. I loved you, she said, and for the first time she sounded human, vulnerable. I really did. Or I thought I did, and you threw it away. You loved the idea of me, Alistair corrected gently, the perfect duke, the beautiful ornament. But you never asked what I wanted, what I needed. You just assumed I'd conform to your vision. Is that so wrong? Wanting your husband to be someone you could be proud of? When it requires him to be someone he's not? Yes. Victoria looked at Elara. And you? You actually convinced him he could be himself? That he didn't need to meet anyone's expectations? I didn't convince him of anything. He decided that himself. Elara held her gaze. I just stood beside him while he did it. Something in Victoria's expression crumbled. I could have done that. If he'd just told me what he wanted. You never asked. The truth of it hung in the air. Victoria had loved Alistair, in her way, but she'd loved her idea of him more, had loved the vision of her future more than the reality of the man in front of her. and when reality didn't match her vision, she'd tried to destroy it rather than adapt. "I'm sorry," Victoria said suddenly. The words sounded forced out of her, for the attack. I didn't think it would go that far. Pemberton hired them, said he'd just scare you. I didn't know they'd actually shoot." "Does it matter?" Elara asked. "You set it in motion. You wanted us afraid, possibly dead. I wanted you gone." Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I wanted everything to go back to how it was before, when Alistair was still mine." "I was never yours," Alistair said, not unkindly. "I was myself. You just didn't want to see it." The guard knocked on the door. "Time's up." They stood. Victoria remained seated, looking suddenly small and lost. At the door, Elara paused, turned back. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I hope you find whatever you're looking for, in prison or after. I hope you learn to see people as they are instead of what you want them to be." Victoria laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Such magnanimity from the victor. Not magnanimity, just experience. Elara touched the place where her ribs still ached. "I know what it's like to be trapped by other people's expectations. It's awful. I wouldn't wish it on anyone." They left her there, walked out into the grey London morning in silence. In the carriage, Alistair finally spoke. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making me see her, really see her. Not as the monster I'd built in my head, but as a person who was hurt and lashed out badly." He took Elara's hand. "I don't forgive her, but I understand now, and that helps." "Good, because holding on to anger just makes you bitter." Elara squeezed his hand. "And we have better things to do than be bitter." "Like throw an audacious ball?" "Exactly like that." The night of the ball arrived cold and clear, stars sharp against black sky. The Vane townhouse blazed with light. Carriages lined the square, guests streaming up the steps in their finest. Music drifted through open windows. Inside, everything gleamed, crystal, silver, polished floors that reflected candlelight like water. Elara stood at the top of the stairs in a gown of deep crimson silk, rubies at her throat that Alistair had given her that morning. Her ribs still ached, but she'd laced the corset carefully. Tonight, she would dance. Alistair beside her in formal black, his hair perfectly arranged, his face visible to everyone. No more shadows, no more hiding. Below them, London's elite gathered, curious, cautious, waiting to see what would happen. The music swelled. The first dance was announced. Alistair held out his hand. "Duchess?" "Duke." She took it, smiling. They descended together. The crowd parted. Everyone watching, judging, wondering. Alistair led her to the center of the ballroom floor. The music began. They danced. And as they moved through the steps, Elara felt something shift in the room. The watching faces softened. The whispers changed tone, because what they were seeing wasn't the beast and his victim. It was a couple. Partners. Two people who'd fought for each other and won. When the dance ended, applause erupted. Genuine this time, not mocking. Other couples joined them on the floor. The ball took on life, became real. Through it all, Elara and Alistair moved together, dancing, talking with guests, presenting a united front that was also utterly genuine. This was their victory, not just surviving Victoria's attack, not just exposing the conspiracy. This, being together in public, being seen, being unafraid. Later, during a break in the dancing, the elderly countess approached. "Well done, Your Grace, both of you. You've given London something it desperately needed." "What's that?" Elara asked. "A reminder that courage matters, that fighting for what's right matters, that reputation can be rebuilt." She smiled. "And you've given every young person trapped by society's expectations a glimpse of what freedom might look like." Bonitans, as the night wore on, more guests approached, offering congratulations, apologies for believing the rumors, support. Not everyone. Some still looked skeptical, some left early, but enough. Enough people chose to see the truth. Enough people decided to stand with them. Around midnight, Elara found herself on the terrace, catching her breath. Her ribs were screaming, but she didn't care. Alistair found her there, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "You should be resting," he said, handing her a glass. "I'll rest when I'm dead, which, thanks to Victoria's incompetent assassins, is not yet." She sipped the champagne, savoring the bubbles. "This is good. We did good." "We did." He moved to stand beside her, looking out over the garden. "I've been thinking about what I said before, about talking, about us." Elara's heart stuttered. "Yes?" "This partnership we've built, this friendship. It's become the most important thing in my life." He turned to face her. "And I find myself wanting more. Not because I'm lonely, not because it's expected, but because somewhere in the past months I fell in love with you." The words hung in the cold air between them. "I love how brave you are," Alistair continued, his voice rough. "How you see problems and immediately start solving them. How you defended me when you barely knew me. How you looked at me, really looked, and didn't flinch." He took her free hand. "I love you, Elara, completely. And I know this marriage started as a transaction, but I'm hoping it might become something real." Elara set down her champagne with shaking hands. "You idiot," she said, but her eyes were bright with tears. "It's already real. It's been real for weeks. I just didn't think you—" She laughed, the sound half sob. "I love you too. Your stubborn pride and your architectural drawings and the way you hide when you're overwhelmed. I love that you see me as an equal, that you listen, that you let me fight beside you instead of trying to protect me from everything. I'll always try to protect you from some things. I know, and I'll try to protect you right back." She stepped closer, ignoring the protest from her ribs. "So yes, let's make this real. Let's choose each other, properly this time." Alistair's smile was sunlight breaking through clouds. He cupped her face with both hands, careful and reverent. "May I kiss you, Duchess?" "You'd better, Duke." He did. And somewhere behind them, through the terrace doors, London society's finest witnessed the beast finally finding his beauty. Only she wasn't beauty. She was strength. She was courage. She was the woman who'd taught him to stop hiding and start living. She was Elara. And she was his. The kiss ended when someone coughed loudly behind them. Thomas stood in the terrace doorway, looking supremely pleased with himself. "Hate to interrupt whatever this is, but you're being summoned. Lord Chancellor wants a word. Something about Victoria's trial." Alistair kept his arm around Elara's waist. "Can it wait?" He seemed to think not. "Also, half the ballroom just watched you two kiss, so you might want to come back inside before the gossip spontaneously combust from excitement." Back in the ballroom, Lord Hartwick waited near the fireplace, his expression grave. "Your Graces, forgive the intrusion, but there's been a development." Elara's stomach tightened. "What kind of development?" "Lady Victoria's solicitor filed a motion this afternoon, claims she's unfit to stand trial due to mental instability brought on by—" He paused, consulting a paper. "Severe emotional distress and feminine hysteria." "Bitches but pom." "That's ridiculous, Alistair said flatly. "She planned everything meticulously. There's nothing unstable about calculated revenge." "I agree, but her family's brought in 3 physicians who will testify otherwise. They're arguing for confinement to a private sanatorium instead of prison." Hartwick's mouth pressed into a thin line. "It's a common tactic. Wealthy families use it to avoid scandal. Woman goes away quietly. Everyone pretends it was illness all along." "And the charges?" Elara demanded. "Would be dropped or held in abeyance indefinitely." He looked genuinely apologetic. "I'll fight it, but these things have a way of working out for people with money and connections." After he left, Elara wanted to scream, or throw something, or both. "She's going to get away with it," she said, barely keeping her voice level. "After everything, the conspiracy, the debts, trying to kill us. She'll spend a few months in some comfortable facility and walk away. Maybe." Alistair's jaw was tight. "Or maybe we have one more move to make." "What move? We've already exposed everything. What else is there?" "Public pressure." He was already thinking. She could see it in his eyes. "Hartwick said these things work when they're quiet, when families handle it privately. But what if this wasn't private? Thomas, who'd been listening, grinned. You want to make it impossible for them to bury this quietly? Exactly. We already published our statement. What if we published more? Details of Victoria's crimes. The evidence. Make it so public that sweeping it under the rug would be more scandalous than a trial. That's aggressive, Elara said, and risky. You'd be admitting just how calculating this all was. How personal. Good. Let them see it's personal. Let them see we won't be quiet victims who disappear gracefully. Alistair looked at her. Unless you think it's too much. Elara thought about Victoria in that cold office. The way she'd admitted to the attack but claimed it had gone too far. The same woman who'd systematically destroyed a man's life because he'd rejected her. It's not too much. It's exactly right. They worked through the night after the ball ended. Alistair's solicitor brought files, evidence, testimonies. They compiled everything into a comprehensive account. Dry and factual in places, devastatingly personal in others. The debt manipulation. The forged letters. The conspiracy to have Alistair declared incompetent. The assassination attempt, complete with the magistrate's reports and the surviving attacker's confession. This is damning, the solicitor said, reading through their draft. But Your Grace, once this is public, there's no walking it back. You'll be exposing your family's private shame, your father's debts, your mother's illness. My family's already weathered the worst, Elara said. She'd written to her father the night before, asking permission. He'd given it. Do what you must, my dear. We've nothing left to hide. They published it in 5 newspapers simultaneously. A full accounting held nothing back. The response was immediate and massive. By noon, the story was in every broadsheet, every gossip column, every conversation in every drawing room across London. The sheer scope of Victoria's conspiracy, documented, evidenced, undeniable, shocked even the most jaded society observers. This is unprecedented, one editorial wrote. The aristocracy has always handled its scandals privately, but the Duke and Duchess of Vane have chosen radical transparency instead. In doing so, they've made it impossible for justice to be denied without public outcry. The outcry came. Petitions appeared demanding Victoria face trial. Women's groups, the few that existed, praised Elara for refusing to be silenced. Even some of Victoria's former allies publicly distanced themselves, condemning her actions now that the full extent was known. The pressure mounted until Victoria's solicitor withdrew the mental instability motion. The trial would proceed. We did it, Thomas said, reading the notice in the paper. She'll actually face consequences. Maybe. Elara was more cautious. Rich people have a way of sliding out of consequences, but at least we made it harder. The trial took place 3 weeks later in a courthouse packed with observers. Elara and Alistair sat in the front row, visible to everyone. A statement in itself. Victoria was brought in wearing subdued gray, her hair simply arranged. Playing the role of repentant lady, Elara realized. One last performance. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The financial records, the letters, testimony from Pemberton, who'd turned witness to save himself. The maid who'd provided copies of Victoria's correspondence. The assassin who'd confessed to being hired through Pemberton's intermediary. Victoria's defense tried to argue she'd been manipulated by her husband, that Pemberton had orchestrated everything using her family connections, that she was a victim too. It might have worked once, before Elara and Alistair's publication, before London had seen the letters in Victoria's own hand, laying out her plans in meticulous detail. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison. Could have been more, he noted, but he was accounting for her sex and station. Still, 12 years. Victoria showed no emotion as the sentence was read, just stood there, perfectly composed, until they led her away. Elara felt Alistair's hand find hers. Squeeze once. It was over. Outside the courthouse, journalists swarmed. Elara had gotten used to them over the past weeks, had learned to give them just enough to satisfy without revealing everything. Your Grace, how do you feel about the verdict? Relieved, Elara said honestly. Justice has been served. That's all we ever wanted. Duke Vane, will you return to your estate now? Alistair smiled. Eventually, but London has grown on us. We'll be spending more time here going forward. More questions, more answers. They handled it together, a united front. Later, back at the townhouse, they finally let themselves collapse. 12 years, Alistair said, staring at the ceiling from where he lay on the drawing room sofa. It doesn't feel real. It's real. Elara was curled in a chair nearby, exhausted. And it's done. Finally done. What do we do now? Whatever we want. She smiled. That's the point, isn't it? We're free. Actually free. Thomas appeared with brandy and glasses. To freedom, then. And to my sister, who's terrifying and brilliant. I'll drink to that, Alistair said. They toasted, drank, let the tension of the past months finally start to ease. Over the following weeks, life settled into something almost normal. Alistair began accepting architectural commissions again. Small projects at first, a garden folly for a friend, renovations on a modest estate. But word spread about his talent, and larger opportunities followed. Elara threw herself into the Thorncliffe restoration project. With Victoria's threat neutralized and money no longer quite so tight, Alistair's legal fees had been substantial, but his estate was still wealthy. She hired proper staff. Gardeners, masons, craftsmen. The manor began to come back to life. They split their time between London and Thorncliffe. Neither felt like exile now. Just two places they chose to be. You know what's strange? Elara said one evening at Thorncliffe, watching the sunset from the renovated East Garden. I'm happy, actually happy. I didn't think that was possible 6 months ago. Alistair, sitting beside her on the new stone bench, smiled. 6 months ago, you were being sold to the beast. Happiness did seem unlikely. The beast turned out to be disappointingly human. Sorry to disappoint. I'm not complaining. She leaned against his shoulder. Being human suits you. He kissed the top of her head. It suits us. Spring came to Thorncliffe with explosive color. The bulbs Elara had planted bloomed, thousands of them, transforming the gardens into a sea of color. Daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, crocuses. The greenhouse overflowed with seedlings ready to be transplanted. Elara worked alongside Thompson every day, dirt under her fingernails, sun on her face. It was the freest she'd ever felt. Your Grace, there's a letter, Annie said one afternoon, finding Elara in the rose garden. The letter was from her mother. Dearest Elara, your father and I have been following your exploits in the papers. I won't pretend to understand all of it, the society politics, the legal matters, but I understand this. You've become extraordinary. The medicine you've been sending has helped tremendously. Dr. Matthews says my condition has stabilized. I'm stronger than I've been in years, and your father, the shame of his debts nearly destroyed him. But watching you transform disaster into triumph has given him purpose again. He's been helping at the church, teaching mathematics to children who can't afford tutors. What I'm trying to say, in my rambling way, is thank you. You saved us. Not just financially, though that too, but you showed us that there's life after shame, that mistakes don't have to be endings. Your sister Margaret sends her love. She's engaged to a banker's son. Nice boy. Sensible prospects. Nothing dramatic, thank heavens. We've had enough drama to last a lifetime. Come visit when you can. I'd like to see this Duchess everyone's talking about. See if I can still find my daughter underneath. All my love? Mother Elara read it twice, tears blurring the words. She found Alistair in his study, bent over drawings for a new conservatory a client had commissioned. We should visit my family, she said. He looked up, pencil still in hand. Of course. When? Next week? I want them to meet you, the real you, not the newspaper version. The real me is significantly less interesting than the newspaper version. Good. They've had enough interesting for a while. The visit happened on a warm May afternoon. Elara's childhood home looked smaller than she remembered, shabbier, but there were new curtains in the windows, fresh paint on the door, small signs of recovery. Her mother met them at the door, and Elara almost gasped. She looked better. Not healthy exactly, the illness had taken too much for that, but stronger, present in a way she hadn't been in years. Elara! Her mother pulled her into a hug that smelled like lavender and home. Let me look at you. Oh, you're beautiful. You look happy. I am happy, Mama. Good. She turned to Alistair, who stood slightly behind Elara, looking uncharacteristically nervous. And you're the Duke everyone's so scandalized by. Your Grace. Alistair bowed formally. None of that. You're family now. She studied him with sharp eyes. You love my daughter? Very much. And you treat her well? I try. She makes it clear when I'm failing. Elara's mother laughed. Good. She always was stubborn. Come in, both of you. I want to hear everything the newspapers didn't print. They stayed for 3 days, long enough for Elara's mother to interrogate Alistair thoroughly and apparently decide he was acceptable. Long enough for her father to take Alistair to his study and have whatever conversation fathers have with the men who marry their daughters under complicated circumstances. Long enough for Elara to remember what family felt like when it wasn't drowning in debt and shame. He's a good man, her mother said on the last evening, helping Elara pack. Damaged, maybe, but good. You chose well. I didn't choose him, not at first. But you did eventually. That's what matters. Her mother folded one of Elara's dresses carefully. You know, when your father told me about the arrangement, I was horrified. My daughter, sold like property. But watching you now, you took something awful and made it beautiful. That's real strength. I had help. Elara thought about Alistair, about Thomas, about all the people who'd stood beside them. I couldn't have done it alone. The best victories never are alone. Back at Thorncliffe, summer settled in with long golden days and warm nights. Elara and Alistair fell into comfortable routines, mornings in the garden or his study, afternoons riding the estate or walking the grounds, evenings in the library reading side by side. This is what I wanted, Alistair said one night. When I left London 10 years ago, this quiet, this peace. You have it now. We have it now. He set down his book. Elara, I've been thinking about the future, our future. Should I be worried? Probably. He smiled. I was thinking about children. Elara's breath caught. They'd skirted around the topic before, but never addressed it directly. Do you want them? She asked. I think so. Eventually. Not right now. We've barely caught our breath from the Victoria situation. But someday. He moved to sit beside her. I keep imagining a little girl with your stubbornness, or a boy with your courage. It seems like it would be good. Hard, probably, but good. I want that too. Elara took his hand. Someday, when we're ready. When we're ready, he agreed. 2 years passed. Thorncliffe was transformed. The gardens were magnificent again, drawing visitors who'd heard of the Duchess of Vane's horticultural achievements. The manor itself was restored, not to its former glory exactly, but to something better. Lived in. Loved. Alistair's architectural practice flourished. He designed country houses, churches, a small museum in Edinburgh, work that challenged him, that he was genuinely proud of. Elara launched a project teaching estate management to young women. Daughters of gentry who'd never been trained for anything practical, now learning bookkeeping and botany and basic law. Small rebellions against a system that treated women as ornamental. They went to London occasionally, attended select social events, maintained the connections they'd fought so hard to rebuild. But Thorncliffe was home. In the spring of their 3rd year together, Elara discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Exhaustion that made her sleep 12 hours and still wake tired. Alistair hovered, worried, driving her slightly mad with his concern. I'm pregnant, not dying, she said for the 100th time, pushing him away when he tried to help her up the stairs. I know. I know. She softened. But you can't protect me from this. You can only be here. I can do that. He was there through all of it. The sickness, the mood swings, the fears that crept in late at night about whether she'd be a good mother. He was steady when she couldn't be, strong when she felt weak. The baby, a girl, was born on a cold November night after 14 hours of labor that Elara was fairly certain might kill her. She didn't die. But she understood, in those brutal hours, exactly how fragile life was. how quickly everything could change. When they placed the baby in her arms, tiny, perfect, screaming, Elara started crying and couldn't stop. "She's beautiful," Alistair said, looking at his daughter with such wonder that Elara's heart hurt. "She's loud. She gets that from you." Rude, but accurate. They named her Catherine after no one in particular, just a name they both liked. Catherine Vane, who would grow up knowing her parents chose each other, who would never be sold or traded or used as currency, who would be free in ways Elara had never been. The first years were chaos. Catherine didn't sleep, which meant neither did her parents. She was colicky and demanding and utterly exhausting. Elara loved her with a ferocity that terrified her. "Is this normal?" she asked Alistair one night, watching their daughter sleep in her cradle. "To love someone so much it hurts?" "I think so." He wrapped his arms around her from behind. "I feel that way about you. That's different." "Is it?" He kissed her temple. "Love is love, Elara. It always hurts a little. That's how you know it's real." When Catherine was 2, a letter arrived from London. Victoria had been released from prison early for good behavior. She'd served only 7 years of her 12-year sentence. "She's leaving England," the letter from Alistair's solicitor explained, "emigrating to America. Her family has disowned her, and she apparently wants a fresh start somewhere no one knows her history." Elara set the letter down, feeling oddly hollow. "How do you feel?" Alistair asked. "I don't know. Relieved she's leaving, angry she got out early, sorry for her." She rubbed her face. "All of it, maybe. None of it. You don't have to feel anything in particular." "I know, I just thought I would. Something definitive. But mostly I just feel tired. Like this is the ending of something that should have ended years ago." "Then let it end." Alistair pulled her close. "We don't have to think about Victoria anymore. Don't have to let her take up space in our lives. She's gone. Let her stay gone." So they did. 5 more years passed. Catherine grew into a wild, fearless child who climbed trees and demanded to learn mathematics, and informed her mother at age 6 that she was going to be an architect like Papa. "Or a ship captain," she amended. "Uncle Thomas said he'd teach me navigation." "Uncle Thomas needs to stop encouraging you," Elara said, but she was smiling. They had 2 more children, a son, James, quiet and thoughtful, where Catherine was bold. Then another daughter, Margaret, named for Elara's sister, who inherited her father's love of books and her mother's stubbornness. The house that had been silent for 10 years filled with noise, laughter, arguments, the chaos of family. Elara's mother came to visit often, her health much improved. She adored her grandchildren, spoiled them relentlessly. Thomas, now a captain, visited between deployments, bearing gifts from distant ports and stories that made the children's eyes go wide. Elara's father came less often, but when he did, he played chess with Alistair and taught James mathematics and seemed lighter somehow, less burdened. The shame that had nearly destroyed their family became just another story. Not forgotten, but no longer defining. One autumn afternoon, 10 years after their marriage, Elara and Alistair walked through the gardens together while the children played nearby under Thompson's supervision. The gardens were spectacular now, not just restored but expanded. New sections, new plantings. People came from across England to see them. "Remember when you first came here?" Alistair asked. "This was all overgrown, dying." "I remember. I thought the whole estate was sad, like it was mourning something." "It was. I was." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "I was dying here slowly, hiding from everything. Then you arrived and refused to let me. I was terrifying and pushy. You were perfect." He took both her hands. "Elara, I've never said this properly. Thank you. For seeing me, for fighting for us, for being brave when I couldn't be. You were brave. You just needed someone to remind you. I needed you." He kissed her, soft and sweet. 10 years together, and it still made her heart race. "I will always need you." "Good, because you're stuck with me." Catherine's voice rang out from across the garden. "Papa, Mama, come see what we found." They went. Because this was their life now. Not the fairy tale Elara had imagined as a girl. Better, somehow. real, messy and complicated and full of love. That evening, after the children were in bed, Elara stood in the library, their library, where everything had begun, looking at the books they'd shared over the years. Alistair found her there, like he always did. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Beginnings, endings, the story we tell ourselves about our life." She pulled down a worn copy of Jane Eyre, the book he'd given her that first night. "I used to think our story was tragic, the girl sold to the beast. But it's not, is it?" "What is it?" "A love story. Not the kind where everything's easy. The kind where you choose each other every day, even when it's hard." She set the book aside and went to him. "The kind that's real." Alistair wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there in the quiet library, surrounded by books and memories and the life they'd built together. Outside, Thorncliffe Manor stood against the darkening sky, no longer abandoned, no longer dying, home, where the beast had learned to be human again, where the bride had become a duchess, a mother, a force of nature who'd changed everything she touched, where two people who'd been trapped by circumstances had chosen freedom, had chosen each other, had chosen love, and lived, not happily ever after, because life was never that simple, but happily enough, which was better, which was real, which was theirs.